Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing well. So let's start with today's topic, application of biotechnology, the remaining topics which we have to study today. All right. So let's proceed with the topic of application of biotechnology. Today we will be learning about biotechnological application in medicines. So how we have utilized the biotechnology in the field of medicine. All right. So let's understand. So there were various kinds of vaccines and drugs which were developed by utilizing the concept of biotechnology. Recombinant DNA technology process has made immense impact. So this development of this rDNA has made immense impact in the development of therapeutic drugs. We will see how therapeutic drugs have been developed by utilizing biotech. Now, the recombinant therapeutics did not induce unwanted immunological response. So what was the best part of using recombinant DNA technology in the development of drug? That it was not creating any kind of unwanted immunological response, all right, which was common in case of non-human sources. Initially, we were isolating certain kind of genes from the animals which were causing a lot of immunological response, but that was not in case of recombinant DNA technology. It was quite safe enough and did not induce any kind of unwanted immunological response. Now, if you see over here, I have used few pictures to show that how we have used recombinant DNA technology in developing certain vaccines. All right. So the majority of vaccines which you can see over here is the utilization of the vaccine is over here. If you see over here that we have used hepatitis B vaccine, okay, to cure from the disease hepatitis, or we are taking in advance since it is a vaccine to so that we do not get hepatitis in future, and the use of humulin, which is a type of insulin developed by the application of biotechnology. I hope this is absolutely clear, right? So with the use of this application of biotechnology, we have utilized about, you can see, 30 recombinant therapeutics which has been developed till now, and 21 is currently running in India, which is the best part. Okay, so 21 is currently being used in India, which is the best part. So 30 recombinant therapeutics have been used. I hope this is clear. So how we are using biotechnology in the field of medicine, we have been using it, but it is quite safe enough, and that has made it much more prevalent, and it did not cause any kind of immunological response which was happening initially. All right. So which was common to the non-human sources. If you are inducing any non-human sources inside your body which is not from a human, so non-human resources may cause certain problems inside our body, right? So due to which we have come up with an idea of recombinant DNA technology for the use and betterment of mankind. All right. Let's proceed to the next part now. Okay. So now we will be doing about the next topic, which is how are we going to develop these vaccines and how have we have achieved this and how we have been using this. All right. So let's proceed to this. So this was few examples like recombinant DNA technology has been used to develop hepatitis B vaccine, the image which you can see over here, and humulin. It's also an artificial insulin, and we will talk about insulin in the upcoming slide. Okay. So remember the points, 30 recombinant therapeutics, which has been approved for human use. Now, approval is also very, very important, and 12 are present in the market now. So now let's understand much more about the biotechnological application in medicines. Now, when we talk about insulin, when do we take insulin? Let's understand. Insulin is taken when somebody is not able to manage the sugar level within the body. All right, where the sugar level goes very high and the production of insulin from the pancreas has not happened. That is causing rise in the level of sugar, which will cause a number of disease, and we call it as diabetes. Okay. So nowadays, this is not an age-specific kind of disease, or you can say it is depending on the lifestyle what we are following, we get a lot of diseases just like diabetes. So management of adult onset diabetes is possible. we can still manage if there is not enough insulin is produced within the body by the utilization of insulin artificially. Okay, so management of adult onset diabetes is possible by taking insulin at a regular interval. And for example, what would be a diabetic patient do if enough human insulin is not available? Insulin is a natural kind of hormones released by the pancreas, but what if the person is not able to produce insulin within the body? Now, what needs to be done? So, to understand this, we need to make sure that how can we get insulin if the body is not producing it? Okay. So, for this, insulin was initially isolated from the animals and just as ineffective as that secreted by human body itself, but it would elicit immune response. This is what I was talking about in the previous slide as well, that initially insulin was extracted from the pancreas of the slaughtered pig, but that insulin was not helpful, or you can say it was causing a lot of immunological response over here. Very important points I would like to discuss over here is, if you see, insulin was initially isolated from other animals. It was effective, but it was causing a lot of immunological response, which was not good enough. And taking such kind of insulin can be very dangerous to the mankind. Okay. So now what happened is, due to this problem, due to this above problem, what the scientists have done is they have tried to utilize the genes of the genes responsible for the production of insulin to be extracted, isolated, and can be grown in a bacterium. This is not anything else, but it is the human insulin gene which we have grown inside a bacterium. So do you think this will cause any immunological response? Definitely no, because we are not taking any foreign gene over here. We are just using the human insulin over here for the production, right? And we have the host, which is bacterium. So this is bacterium is acting as a host. Now see, what are the conditions? If a person is healthy, condition number one, if the person is healthy, insulin would be produced. This is pancreas basically. Pancreas is a heterocrine gland. You must have studied this. And it produces insulin, glucagon, and other hormones, right? So insulin will be produced from the pancreas. This is going to get inside the blood, and it will ask the cells to use the glucose, and it is going to balance out the level of glucose in your blood. Pancreas is going to release insulin. Insulin is going to make the cell use this glucose which is formed. So by this process, insulin level is going to come in a normal level. Now, what are the two types of insulin? Type 1 and type 2, you can see. Now, type 1 suggests that pancreas failure to produce insulin. So what is happening over here is pancreas is not able to produce insulin. Pancreas is not able to produce insulin, right? So that means if there is no insulin produced, so there will be increase in level of glucose in the blood that will lead to diabetes. Now, another condition is where the pancreas produces insulin, but the cells will not be able to use it. Enough insulin is produced and the cell fails to respond to the insulin properly. Again, this is a problem. And ultimately, what is going to happen after a long run? The production of insulin will just get reduced because the cells are not responding. There is no utilization. So finally, at a later stage, the insulin production will also reduce. Okay, so the first condition is when the pancreas is not producing insulin, and the second is the pancreas is producing insulin, but the cells are not responding to the insulin, right? Now, how do we tackle such situation? Our question is, how do we tackle such situation? So yes, we can definitely cater this problem by using recombinant DNA technology, right? Biotechnology, basically. So let's understand this. So now what we can do is, we have to take the insulin externally. If our body is not producing, that means we have to take it externally. So think about whether insulin can be orally administered to a diabetic people or not. So now can we take a tablet kind of thing, just take in and get rid of diabetes? Let's understand. So oral administration of insulin would not be possible. Why? Let's understand. Okay. So when any drug or substance is administered orally, it passes through the digestive system. This artificial insulin is going to pass through our digestive system. Now what is happening is when insulin is a protein hormone, so what is going to happen? There are protease enzyme within the digestive system. So it is going to degrade the insulin because it's a peptide. It is peptide in nature. So that's why it will become inactive. It won't be efficient enough to treat your insulin. So destruction of structural aspects of the protein is going to happen here. And that is why what we can do over here is we need to take the insulin subcutaneously. That means under the skin. Okay. So human insulin is always administered subcutaneously. You might have seen in real life as well. People do just try to put the muscles of your stomach near the stomach. It is generally applied. And then you need to hold your muscle like this and apply the insulin injection. So this is the, you can say, a way we can apply or we can utilize the insulin, artificial insulin over here. So we are just talking about over here, artificial insulin. I hope this is absolutely clear. So we cannot take it orally. Orally cannot be administered. We can only take it in the form of, has to be taken subcutaneously under the skin in the form of injections, right? So I hope this is absolutely clear. Next, we will move on to the next part. Let's understand what is the structure of insulin over here, okay? So in order to understand, we need to, initially what happened was insulin used for diabetes were extracted from the pancreas of slaughtered cattle and pig, which I was talking about, but that was creating a lot of immunological response. We cannot afford to use such kind of insulin, which is going to create a lot of immunological response. So insulin from an animal source, though cause some patient to develop allergies or other types of reaction to the foreign protein. So body was not able to accept that and it was causing immunological response. Now what they did is, the scientists have understood the structure of the insulin. Now, what is the insulin structure comprises of? Let's understand. So, when we talk about insulin, let's underline over here a few points. This point is very, very important. So, insulin consists of two short polypeptide chains. So, it has two short polypeptide chain. Apart from that, it has chain A and chain B, which is the two short polypeptide chain, and they are linked by disulfide bridge. But again, you can see that over here it is written as proinsulin. So you can say when insulins are released, they are in inactive form. This is inactive insulin, which we are calling it as proinsulin. Okay. It consists of chain A. It consists of chain A. It consists of chain B. And in between, you will find the chain C. So this is how the arrangements are. And all these chains are attached by a disulfide bridge. Okay. So disulfide bridge is involved. Now, if I talk about a mature insulin, it will be devoid of peptide chain. So in a mature insulin, you will just find chain A, chain B attached by disulfide bridge, which you can see over here, without free C peptide. Okay. So this was the thing which was done to ensure that we can create a recombinant, we can use recombinant DNA technology to assemble such kind of insulin. Let's proceed to the next slide. Okay. So now what happened is in mammals, including humans, insulin is synthesized as a pro hormone. That's what I was talking about, inactive hormone. And before, when it gets mature, you will not find the C peptide over there. It is not there in the mature insulin if I talk about. So before it becomes fully mature and functional hormone, which contains an extra stretch of C peptide. this C-peptide is not present in mature insulin and is removed during maturation. So during maturation of insulin, the C-peptide is removed. So this was taken care and we have utilized recombinant DNA technology for the same. So recombinant DNA techniques was used for getting insulin assembled into a mature form. So there was a American company, Eli Lilly, in 1983, they developed this artificial insulin. They prepared the two chains of DNA they prepared the two chains of insulin chain A and chain B of human insulin. And finally, what they did was they have sequenced it in the lab and they have inserted it into the plasmid of the E. coli, produce insulin chain. Now, within the E. coli, they are going to produce n number of insulin chains. Now, what they did is chain A and chain B were produced separately. We have extracted it separately, okay, and combined by creating disulfide to form human insulin. So again, later on, this chain A and chain B were assembled together with the help of disulfide bond. This is how we got the structure of human insulin created artificially by an American company, Eli Lilly, in the year 1983. Okay, let's proceed to the next part. Now, let's understand this mechanism. This is how they have over here. The example shows gene of a human growth hormone, right? So we have been using it for the correction of the growth hormone or treating of the growth hormone in humans. So what we have done over here is, let's understand. So if you can see, this is a human cell, okay? We have isolated a gene of interest, okay? We can say GOI, that is gene of interest, a gene for, what is this kind of gene? This gene is for human growth, okay? This is a human growth hormone which is responsible for growth. We have isolated it and this is our gene of interest from a human cell. And now the second phase, what we can see is from the bacterial cell, we need to get this plasmid out because what is this plasmid? This is an self auto-replicating extra chromosomal DNA. This is the self-replicating extra chromosomal DNA. Right. This is self-replicating extra chromosomal DNA. We already know that bacteria has their own chromosome as well as they have an extra chromosomal DNA, which we call it as plasmid. So you know that plasmids are very, very important in terms of recombinant DNA technology. We will extract this by using molecular scissors restriction enzymes. We have extracted this is EcoR1. This is the name of our plasmid. This is the name of our plasmid. All right. Now what happens is, we cut both this gene of interest and this EcoR1 plasmid with the help of restriction enzymes, which is, there are different types of restriction enzyme. We can use any one of them, which can cut both this particular gene of interest and the plasmid. We'll cut it. We will get the sticky ends now. Now ligation is going to happen. Ligation is nothing but sticking of this gene of interest with the plasmid. And this plasmid will be responsible for inserting this recombinant. This has now transformed into a recombinant DNA. This is now transformed into a recombinant DNA, which is having a gene of growth hormone. Now, this is again inserted into the bacterial cell for containing. Now, this will be incorporated into the genome of the bacteria. And finally, when the bacterial cell will divide, it will have the gene of human growth hormone. So this human growth hormone can be extracted out of this bacteria. Okay, this can be extracted for future use. So this is basically the application of recombinant DNA technology or biotechnology from this. Okay, so this is how we will develop. This is one of the example of human growth hormone, but however, we can have other examples as well. I hope this is absolutely clear. Now we will move on to the next part, which talks about gene therapy. Now we are done with how we have utilized biotechnology in medicine. Now we need to talk about gene therapy. Now we know that what happens, what is a gene therapy? So basically any defective gene can be corrected, can be made, we can correct that particular defective gene by using a biotechnological application. So for example, if a person is born with a hereditary disease, can a corrective therapy be taken for such disease? Gene therapy is an attempt. So for example, a baby is born with some defective gene and we want to make sure that that defective gene is removed and a normal and a functional gene is incorporated in place of that defective gene. So in that case, gene therapy would be absolutely applicable. So what is gene therapy? So let me show you what is gene therapy over here is. A gene therapy means, okay. So a gene therapy is a collection of method. Yes, it is a collection of method that allows correction of gene. It will allow something has went wrong. We have to correct it. So correction of the gene defect that has been diagnosed in a child or embryo. So could be diagnosed in child and embryo. Here the genes are inserted into the person's cells and tissue. So we have to insert a gene. What kind of gene? Functional gene. Functional gene will be utilized here. And finally, we can treat this kind of disorders or diseases. Correction of genetic defect involves delivery of normal gene into the individual. So how can we correct a genetic defect? We can correct it by incorporating a normal gene into the individual embryo to take over the function of and compensate with non-functional gene. So look at the image here, cell with broken or mutated gene. So this was the problem and this is actually a defective gene if I talk about. Defective or a problematic gene. What we have done is we have to replace this. So new functional gene was introduced externally. So externally what we did was we have found out a functional gene, we have introduced it into the cell and finally functional cell function was restored and the cell was able to perform a normal function. So this mechanism is known as gene therapy, where your gene which is not proper or which has undergone mutation, which has undergone distortion can be replaced by a functional gene. So this is known as gene therapy, which is very, very simple it appears, but it has a lot of complications as well. Now let's proceed to the next part of the topic, which is biotechnological application in medicine. Now the first gene therapy was done in 1990 to a 4-year-old girl, which she was suffering from the deficiency of ADA, adenosine deaminase enzyme. This enzyme was crucial for immune system to function. So this gene was responsible for providing immunity and that particular gene was deleted. So disorder was caused due to deletion of the gene for adenosine deaminase. So basically, if you can see deleted area, that portion of ADA was deleted and after deletion, it looked absolutely normal. But we know that the genes was deleted, which is ADA. Now what happens is there are two conditions which happens over here. So gene therapy, what happens is this is your DNA. This is the structure of the DNA, which we can see here. Now mutation has happened. What is mutation? Any change in the structure of the DNA. Change in the structure of a DNA. This is basically a mutation. Now, what is going to happen if there is any structural change in the DNA or any base pair change in the DNA? The DNA is going to form RNA, that is known as transcription, and from the RNA, proteins will be synthesized by the process translation. Now, the protein which is formed is a mutant protein. This is a defective protein, you can say, which will cause lot of problems. Okay. So now what we can do is we can correct this. We have found out, okay, this particular gene is a problem. This has undergone mutation. We will have to change this and we will utilize a foreign gene externally, which is functional. And we will use gene therapy vector over here. Any kind of vector can be used, a retrovirus, depending on whether it is plants or animals. Okay, we will use a vector and then a corrective gene will be inserted into the plasmid of that vector. This is the plasmid and the the functional gene will be utilized, and we have got a recombinant DNA. Now, this has formed into a recombinant DNA. From this recombinant DNA now, it is going to form RNA by the process of transcription. It is a normal mRNA because we have changed it. We have used a functional gene over here by the process of recombinant DNA. So it's a normal messenger RNA. This normal messenger RNA definitely is going to produce a normal protein. So this is how our gene therapy is going to work. So basically this adenosine deaminase ADA causes SCID, SCID. You will hear this term SCID as well. It is not mentioned in your NCERT. However, SCID is severe combined immunological disorder. This is the full form of SCID disorder. Okay. So basically, deletion of this gene was causing no release of T and B lymphocyte. And this T and B lymphocyte was providing immunity. Since this gene is absent, none of them were able to produce P and the T lymphocyte. And finally, immunity was lost. And any kind of medicine is not going to work because the immunity of this particular girl has completely disrupted. So for this condition, we have done gene therapy. We have used adenosine deaminase functional gene externally, and we have introduced into this girl and found out a solution for this particular disease. Let's understand what they have done over here. So in some children, ADA deficiency can be cured. How can we treat it? By bone marrow transplantation or by enzyme replacement therapy, by intravenously giving enzyme replacement in which functional ADA is given to the patient by injection. Just now I was talking about functional ADA gene, which will be, or normal ADA gene will be introduced. Now, enzyme replacement therapy is this genes are going, when we are injecting this, might be after certain years, it is going to get finished, and again, the same problem may arise. So how do we correct this, and how do we get a complete cure? So complete cure can be a bone marrow transplant where we are actually working at a very basic level where we need not to go for any other procedure after this. But the problem with both these approaches is that they are not completely curable. Okay. Yes, they cannot be completely curable. So what are the other things we can do? So we need to understand what is a bone marrow, which you can see. Bone marrow is basically present at the backbone. Okay. From within the bones, you can find, okay, you will find certain stem cells within the bones. And these stem cells have the potential to produce WBC, RBC, and platelets. There are different kinds of bone marrow, red bone marrow, yellow bone marrow. So red bone marrow will be generally responsible for the production of these blood cells. And if we can bring about the change here, we can definitely get rid of certain situation. But again, these are quite temporary kind of treatment which we can see. Okay. So let's proceed. What else can be done here to get rid of such kind of diseases, right? So let's proceed. So the first step towards gene therapy is, now let's see what we have done is lymphocytes from the blood of the patients are grown in a culture outside the body. Now what we have done is we have extracted the lymphocytes. You know, this is a type of white blood cell. There are different types of WBC, agranulocyte and granulocyte, right? So this is also one of the white blood cell lymphocyte has been extracted from the patient's blood and it is being cultured in the lab. Now, what happened is after the culture, what we have done over here is a functional ADA, a functional ADA or cDNA using a retrovirus is then introduced into the lymphocyte. So what we have done over here is a functional ADA. We have extracted the functional ADA gene and we have incorporated that into the retrovirus, creating a cDNA, complementary DNA of that particular functional ADA gene. And how did we do, how did we create this cDNA? By using retroviral vector. Okay. Now these cDNA was introduced into these lymphocytes, which we have extracted from the patient, which are subsequently returned to the patient. So we have cultured this lymphocyte, we have introduced the cDNA into it. Now what happens is, however, these cells are not immortal. They are not going to survive forever. The patient requires periodic transfusion. So over this also, there is regular transfusion is required for such genetically engineered lymphocyte. So every time is what happens is this kind of procedure will have to be done at periodic level. However, if gene is isolated from a bone marrow cells, producing ADA is introduced into the cells at the embryonic stage, it could be a permanent cure. However, if we are isolating genes from the bone marrow, okay, what is going to happen? It is going to produce ADA. Okay, it is going to produce ADA automatically from the embryonic stage. And thus we can say that it is a permanent cure from this particular disease. Let's have a look over here in this image. So if you just go through this image, that would be much more clear. Bacterium carrying plasmid with cloned normal human ADA gene. So this is a bacterium. And there is a plasmid in the bacterium where we have cloned the ADA gene. Can you see this blue color gene? This is the functional ADA gene. And genetically disabled retrovirus. This retrovirus has been disabled so that it does not cause any infection. And we are using this as a vector. This is a vector basically. And we have introduced this kind of plasmid into this. So cloned ADA gene is incorporated into the virus. We have incorporated this into the virus. Now we have got a cloned DNA gene is incorporated. Finally, we see that T cells with disabled ADA gene isolated from a SCID patient. Just now I told you what is SCID patients are severely combined immunological disorder. T cells with disabled ADA gene is isolated from the SCID patient. So disabled ADA gene will be isolated from the T cells of the patient. Now what we do is, these cells were allowed to interact with the retrovirus infected T cells. So this was the retrovirus infected T cells. Okay. And with ADA gene, and this one is the, you can say, defective kind of ADA gene. Then we will allow them to interact and there will be a transformation process between these two. One is your retrovirus T cells, which has the functional ADA gene, and the other one is the defective ADA gene. Both are going to undergo transformation and the cells are grown in culture to ensure ADA gene is active. So they will be grown further and they are going to form and T cells where they have got the ADA gene incorporated into it. And finally, what we can do is, this can be implanted into the zygote or the baby so that it can overcome this kind of disorder of ADA deficiency. So genetically altered cells are implanted producing ADA. So this is the normal procedure what we have done. This is the flow chart which I have just shown you to explain the same. I hope this is absolutely clear, which is the first gene therapy which was done. So this was the first gene therapy done in a 4-year-old girl who was suffering from an ADA gene deficiency, right? Now, biotechnological application in molecular diagnosis. How molecular diagnosis is useful. How it is applicable in molecular diagnosis. An effective treatment of a disease can be done. How can we treat a disease effectively? If we have known that at the early stage, like early diagnosis and understanding its pathophysiology is very important. So we need to understand how like severe that particular disease is and how it is going to impact. That can be done only when we have understood or diagnosed it at a very early stage. Now, when we talk about conventional method, the previous method, old method was we were using serum, urine samples for the early detection. We were using these samples to diagnose, but they were not giving us an early detection. Early detection was not possible by using this urine analysis and serum analysis, which was done previously. This was a conventional method. But now what happened is we are very quick in understanding the stages. And if we can detect it way advanced, that becomes much more easier. For example, nowadays we are using recombinant DNA technology, polymerase chain reaction, which is also known as PCR, and enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, which is ELISA, are some of the techniques that serves the purpose of early diagnosis. So if we use these techniques, we are able to diagnose the disease at a very early stage. So let's understand this process now one by one. Okay. So now my question is, you understand urine, but what is a serum over here? So we need to understand that a serum is a component of the blood without the blood clot. I mean, if you remove the blood clot, the remaining part which is there is your serum. So serum is basically plasma minus clotting factor. So that is your serum. So serum is a liquid or undiluted part of the blood which lacks clotting factor. Okay. Undiluted or liquid part of the blood without clotting factor. Hence it is formed after blood. So the serum helps in diagnosis of disease such as blood pressure, sugar, cholesterol can be detected from the serum. Okay. So serum can be extracted by the pathologists by just eliminating the blood clotting factors, and they will get the serum. And we should also know the differentiation between serum and plasma. Plasma is the liquid part of the blood devoid of the blood cell, which is WBC, platelets, and RBC. Okay. I hope the serum topic is clear. You can also see what is the purpose of urine test. We give the sample and then it is being diagnosed at the lab where we can get the specific results, right? So now the presence of pathogen, how can we detect the presence of pathogen in the urine sample or in the serum? Okay. So pathogens could be bacteria, virus, and various other pathogens. It is normally suspected only when the pathogen has produced a disease. Now, initially what was happening is we were able to detect it only when it has caused a disease. But that becomes very crucial. By this time, that means the concentration of pathogen must have very high. That's why we are able to diagnose it from these samples. However, very low concentration of bacteria or virus at the time of symptoms of the disease are not yet visible. So can we detect the disease when the concentration is very low for this bacteria and viruses which causes diseases? Yes, we can. We can do it by, the first procedure would be amplification of the nucleic acid by PCR. We can make multiple copies of the nucleic acid using PCR, polymerase chain reaction. Okay. So we can take the sample. Okay. Then we need to amplify the nucleic acid over here. The DNA can be amplified. Okay. And finally, you can see or detect it with the help of certain radioactive element attached to it. So this is the procedure. We will get into details of PCR in the next slide. So now, can you explain how PCR can detect a very low amount of DNA? That we need to understand. Even at a very low concentration, PCR is able to detect the kind of pathogen. So PCR is nowadays currently being used in HIV in suspecting AIDS patient. However, we have used PCR, RT-PCR during COVID-19. Okay. So it is also being used to detect mutation in the genes that lead to cancer. That can also be used in the detection by using PCR, and it can also be used in identifying various genetic disorders. So you can understand the severity, how important the PCR technique is, where we can detect the genetic disorders, or we can also go about in checking mutations in the genes that can also be detected. Now you can see during COVID-19, we have this RT-PCR kit, which was used to diagnose or find out about the virus, which if it is present inside our body or not. We have also seen during COVID-19 how the sample were taken and the swabbing was taken from the cheek part, or the nasal specimen was taken from the nose, and RT-PCR was done, and we were getting results whether we are suspected of COVID-19 or not. So this is very crucial. So there are various applications of PCR in the various fields of molecular diagnosis. Now let's understand what is a PCR. Let's understand step by step. So when we talk about PCR, it comes under three stages. What are the three stages over here? The first one is your denaturation. So what do you mean by denaturation over here is, denaturation is if you check this DNA, the two strands are going to get separated into one strand. So two strands of the DNA will get separated here. And this separation of strand is known as denaturation. This is the first step of PCR. Denaturation required to separate the double strands of DNA sample. And the temperature at which this denaturation is done is at a very high temperature, 94 to 98 degrees C for 20 to 30 seconds. So what is going to happen? At this 94 to 98 temperature, which is for a duration of 20 to 30 seconds, it will break the hydrogen bond and it will break the hydrogen bond between the base pairs and it is going to form a single strand. Now, what is annealing? The second stage is annealing. Annealing of primer. So basically, primers are getting added on to the separated strand. Here, the reaction temperature is lowered to allow the complementary base pairing between the PCR. So what we are trying to do over here is complementary base pairing with primer, basically. Sorry. So it's a primer annealing with the primer. The primer is being added and they are forming a complementary base pairing with the separated DNA strand and a complementary part of the single strands of the DNA template. A proper temperature needs to be maintained here. The temperature is bit around 60 to 70 degrees C is maintained in order to allow highly specific and proper primer hybridization. Then the DNA polymerase binds to the template primer and hybrid and starts the DNA synthesis. Now, once they bind, again, DNA polymerase will come in and over here, tag polymerase, you can see that is going to add that this tag polymerase is temperature sensitive polymerase, which is being extracted from a bacteria, Thermus aquaticus. Thermus aquaticus is the name of the bacteria from where the tag polymerase has been isolated. Why the special kind? Because the temperature is too high and this polymerase may get denatured or they may not work at a very high temperature. So we need a temperature sensitive polymerase, tag polymerase derived from Thermus aquaticus. Thermus aquaticus, which is a bacteria, grows in a temperature sensitive area. Now, along with it, DNA polymerase adds the nucleotide. Nucleotides are also added in the 5' and 3' direction. Now, finally, we can see that there is a synthesis of complementary DNA template over here. So complementary strands of the DNA template has been done and we can actually amplify the DNA which has a defective gene and can be visualized further. So this is the mechanism. So first step is denaturation. Second step is your annealing and the third step is your extension. This is how the process works. Now we will move on to the next part of the slide, which is, okay. Now this is the process. You can see we have just learned, we have taken the sample of the DNA, which is in very less amount. DNA template is there. Denaturation, can you see denaturation? How what is happening? The two strands are getting separated because we are using a very high temperature over here. Then what happens is annealing. We have added the primer to it. This pink color one is your primer and this is being added. Along with it, once the addition of annealing of the primer happens, the next step would be extension of the strand. Now, what is going to happen is we have added DNTP and DNA polymerase over here along with the primer is able to form the extension of the DNA, which was initially not happening. And finally, the end product analysis can be done and we can look at the DNA at a disease point of view. All right. So what are the things you required? You require tag polymerase, you require PCR tube, you need thermocycles. The cycle is repeated about 30 cycles and there are about millions of copies of the defective DNA can be produced and can be visualized. Okay. DNTP. So nucleotides are also used, which is DNTPs, which is ATGC. All these are the nitrogenous base, which are the nucleotides. And this is how the strand extension is going to happen. And we can utilize the small amount of DNA to view in the large amount, right? So let's proceed to the next part now. So again, another step of visualizing is the last one was your PCR. Now we will be doing with ELISA. The name, what do you mean by ELISA? It's an enzyme linked immunosorbent assay. So we are using an enzyme and we are trying to find out whether the antigen for that particular disease is present or not. Let's understand this. A single standard DNA or RNA which we are trying to analyze is tagged with radioactive molecule and it is allowed to hybridize. So single stranded DNA or RNA, whichever is there, we will tag it with the radioactive probe or molecule and it's allowed to hybridize to its complementary DNA in a clone of cells followed by detection using radio autoradiograph. So very simply, we have to use a radioactive element to get along with the DNA or RNA. The clone having a mutated gene will hence not appear on the photographic film. So basically, we are trying to make a connection between the tagged DNA, RNA with radioactive with the complementary DNA if it is producing color or if there is a gene present, a clone having a mutated gene will hence we will not be seeing it in the photographic film because the probe will not have complementarity with the mutated gene. So the basic funda over here is the probe will not have complementarity. It is not going to have a complementarity with the mutated gene. So this is how we can detect this. ELISA is based on the principle of antigen-antibody interaction or antigen-antibody complex. Infection by pathogen can be detected by the presence of antigen. How do we know whether the pathogen is present or not? By the presence of antigen. Antibodies are already there. So presence of antigen like protein or glycoprotein, etc. Or by detecting antibody synthesized against the pathogen. Or there are two ways. Either you can detect the pathogen, the antigens, or by detecting the antibody synthesized against the pathogens. Okay. So these are the two ways. You can look at the diagram as well. Capturing of the antibody, which we know, this is the target antigen. The enzyme linked detection antibody. This is again another antibody which is linked to an enzyme. Okay. And you can see over here, this is the enzyme, which you can see. And this is how we can see that there will be, if then antigen is present, specific to the antibody, there will be change in the color of the substrate. And that is going to lead to the detection of the pathogens. Okay. So this is the antigen, this is the antibody, antigen-antibody complex is forming. This is the enzyme labeled detection antibody, and this is the substrate. Enzyme is going to change the substrate, and this substrate is going to produce chromogenic material. The color is going to change, and if the color changes, which can ensure that there is a specific antigen in it. Okay. So antigens can be proteins or glycoproteins, which you can see. And this point is very, very important. A single stranded DNA or RNA is tagged with radioactive molecule and is allowed to hybridize to its complementary DNA. All right. I hope this is clear. So this is ELISA. Let's see what are the different types of ELISA as well to understand the such kind of concepts, right? So ELISA is very, very important in detection during the time of AIDS. ELISA can be used. So there are various applications of ELISA: direct ELISA, indirect ELISA, sandwiched ELISA, and competitive ELISA. So let's have a look here. So this is, we are doing a molecular diagnosis. So if you see what they have done is this, what is AG? AG is antigen and AB is antibody. Okay. This is antigen and antibody. And we already know that ELISA is based on the concept of antigen-antibody complex. This is antigen. This is primary antibody conjugated. So this is the primary antibody. Okay. 1 degree, you can say primary antibody. And it is linked to an enzyme. This is the enzyme. The yellow color one is the enzyme. And this enzyme is also linked to a substrate. So this is a direct ELISA where the antigen is directly attached to the primary antibody conjugation, right? And indirect mein, what you can see is primary antigen. So there are two antibodies here and these antibodies, this is AG, which is your antigen. And this again, the complex is forming. This is indirect because they are not in direct contact. Primary antibody conjugate is not directly in contact with the antigen. Now, sandwiched is, you can see this antigen is in between the two antibodies. So we will call it as sandwiched. And competition ELISA is basically there will be two antigen and two antibodies with their respective substrate enzyme complex, and they will be a severe competition between these two to show the presence of color, or they will try to compete with each other. So this is ELISA, and very importantly, you need ELISA to diagnose various diseases to bring about the things. Okay, so ELISA can also, with this concept of antigen antibody complex can be seen in the detection of um, HCG kind of detection, which is present in the urine of a pregnant woman, can also be detected using the pregnancy kit. That pregnancy kit is also based on antigen antibody kind of phenomena over there. So this is the thing. You should know what is antibody, what is antigen. An antigen antibody complex is forming, which is attached to an enzyme and a substrate. Enzyme is going to change the structure of the substrate by imparting a color. The color signifies that there has been a kind of disease-causing microbes which are present. I hope this is absolutely clear. Let's move on to the next part now. All right. So let's do some quiz time. So which kind of therapy was given in 1990 to a 4-year-old girl with a DNA deficiency? ADA deficiency, adenosine deaminase. This is a NEET 2016 question. So option A, radiation therapy. Option B, gene therapy. Option C, radiation therapy. I'm sorry, the option has got repeated again. Option D, immunological response. The correct answer is basically your, the correct answer would be your gene therapy. Yes, this is what we have done, ADA deficiency. What is an illustration of gene therapy? Which of the following is an illustration? Is the manufacture of injectable hepatitis B vaccine? Option A. Option B, development of vaccines for edible crops like potatoes, or the insertion of adenosine deaminase in SCID patients, creating children in test tube by artificial insemination and implantation of the fertilized egg. The correct answer to it would be option C, insertion of adenosine deaminase, because we are talking about gene therapy. There is another question. ELISA is used to detect virus, where the key reagent is. This is NEET 2004-2003 question. The correct answer is alkaline phosphatase. All right. Production of human protein in bacteria by genetic engineering is possible because this is a NEET 2005 question. So production of human protein in bacteria by genetic engineering is possible by which of the options are correct? The human chromosomes can replicate in the bacterial cell. Option B, the mechanism of gene regulation is identical in humans and bacteria. The bacterial cell can carry out the DNA splicing reaction, or option D, genetic codes are universal. The correct answer is genetic codes are universal. This you will study in the chapter the structure in the molecular basis of inheritance, a genetic code, which is a different code, there are 62 codons which codes for specific proteins that we will study. So I hope that this topic is absolutely clear to you, and we have tried to summarize everything which is very, very important in terms of biotechnology. I hope you will like this. Thank you so much.